speaker this evening, and it is Professor Daniel Rowe, who is a professor of OBGYN and the divisional director at the University of Connecticut, the director of the REI Fellowship, and the former IVS director for 15 years. Charles, a very, very interesting gentleman who will tell us some of the work he's been doing recently with Cooper Surgical. He loves the field of reproductive medicine, which I love to hear passionate people, which is fabulous. Providing patient-centered care and bringing value-based patient care to his patients. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So welcome. And who was there for Ryan Jenkins' talk this morning? Wasn't that a fabulous talk?
Yeah.
You know, and it's, you know, I am a baby boomer and I've got 3 millennials at home, and it rang true so much of the things he said. And when thinking about listening to his talk and thinking about how it applied to this talk today, I wrote down a few notes. And one was that millennials and Generation Z folks like to alleviate friction points through their patient experience. And, you know, this rings true, I think, with all of us. But eliminating friction on the infertility journey is duration of infertility, miscarriage, and eliminating, you know, bad outcomes. He spoke about the role of the doctor from a millennial perspective, and, you know, our ability to deliver compassion to the patient experience. And he also talked about our ability to improve our own emotional intelligence as our field improves artificial intelligence. And we're going to talk a little bit about the addition of artificial intelligence to PGT. So we're going to talk a bit about who benefits from PGT and more specifically PGT-I. Does PGT add value for individual patients? And talk about a patient discussion and then show some of our own results from UConn. Many of us have been in this field for longer than we care to admit and have seen changes over time. And this is the UConn utilization of PGT by year. And, you know, we did cleavage stage biopsies for a while, right? And then there's been but the frequency wasn't too high. And over time, we've had a lot of innovation in the field. We've had innovation of blastocyst culture. And we used to think maybe that's poor man's PGT, or blastocyst culture helps choose eukaryotic embryos a bit better than cleavage stage. But then we had the advent of vitrification. We had the advent of CGH and array CGH, and then high resolution next-gen sequencing. And these technologies are game changers, and patients are hearing about it, and we're offering it to patients in the exam room, and the utilization of PGT is just taking off. And this is the last bar we have for 18, but 19 is obviously going higher. And it's a rare patient discussion now where patients don't just they want this technology. There's been a lot written about PGT. We know that, you know, cleavage stage biopsy perhaps damages embryos. That's why we don't use it as much. One of the reasons anyway, but blast biopsy is safer. We know that when we do euploid single embryo transfer, we put 1 embryo back versus 2 untested embryos, and in the young population, the pregnancy rates are similar, but the twin rate is 50% when doing double embryo transfer. So is that really the best thing to do? The same group suggests that PGT is cost-effective, shortens treatment time, then decreases miscarriage risk. Well, that resonated with me this morning. Let's take all of this friction out of our lives. This is validation of the PGT with SART data, 2011 and 12, and I'm going to present a little bit more of this. We had a big randomized clinical trial that is being released, and I think it still shows that PGT is valuable for the older patients. So, PGT implantation rates, they're pretty constant over the age groups, over 42 implantation rate is still nearly 70%. And if we look at comparative SART data from 2013, we see the same old story. So this is a big delta. And if we look at live birth rate per retrieval, right? Because if we look at it by transfer, we cheat a little bit because everyone doesn't get a transfer. But if we look at it by retrieval, we still see, and this is data courtesy of David McCullough, that there's a delta. This is 5 years worth of SART data with about 500,000 cycles. If we look at the miscarriage rate by patient age with or without PGT, it's not so different here, but it's pretty different here. And this is a very meaningful difference to these patients, which we'll talk about. So the effect of the PGT: improved live birth rate per transfer, decreased miscarriage rates in most studies, improved pregnancy rate per retrieval, particularly for older populations, and some folks believe with modeling that we improve cost efficiency for some patients. We have to be humble though. We know we're still learning. Technology is evolving. And we don't know everything yet. And the PGT platform that we're using today may not look the same in 5 or 10 years from now. We know that. But our group has decided that we want to partner with a PGT genetics company that's improving constantly with feedback from patients. And so we do know that with the addition of artificial intelligence at CooperGenomics, they've used 1,000 embryos worth of data to calibrate their testing. They've validated it with nearly 10,000 embryos worth of data. And they've eliminated the need for subjectively calling the euploidy or aneuploidy or the reads. And this is really significant because we don't want to make mistakes when we're judging human embryos. Other platforms have not done this extensive validation. So let's talk about a specific patient. This is a 38-year-old who was through my office. She got 20 eggs, 15 fertilized, and she produced 6 blasts. So here they are. Which one do transfer? And we could take the philosophy that we're going to sequentially transfer each and every one of these embryos until she gets pregnant. And we know that not all these embryos are likely to result in a pregnancy, given euploidy rates that we know. Or we could say, let's test these embryos to see which one has the best potential for live birth. And so you know the routine. Culture the embryos to blast, we do a biopsy, we send 5 to 10 cells to our genetics company, and they run through a process which Tony is going to describe in a bit of detail later on, where they fragment the DNA, they label with a barcode, they replicate it, they match it with native DNA, and they give us a report of whether or not these embryos are euploid, aneuploid, or mosaic. And so this was a result for this particular patient, and I think is pretty graphic. We have a normal XX, we have a normal XY, and we have 3 that are aneuploid and 1 that's mosaic. And if we transfer this 46XX monosomy 7, what's going to happen? They're not likely to get pregnant because there are very few monosomic human beings walking around, and these pregnancies usually don't implant. These embryos don't implant, and so if they do, they miscarry. But we can't say the same for the next trisomy 21 embryo, right? If we implant this embryo may implant. It may cause severe congenital anomalies. It may miscarry, and it may cause this mother and this family a lot of anguish. Likewise with the trisomy 18. So we want to avoid transferring these embryos if we can to deliver compassionate care. to our patients who work so hard to get pregnant. In our lab, if we have this, if it's certainly a patient doesn't have any children at home, then we'll rely on morphologic assessment of the embryos and transfer the best morphologic embryo, because we don't do a lot of sex selection in our clinic. If you transfer the low-level mosaic, we're learning, right? There may be 100 or 200 babies after mosaic embryo transfer. Most of these seem to be normal for the low levels, and maybe there's not too much risk of putting back a monosomy, but we still have a lot to learn. So this is a poster. It's poster 824 on the floor. So maybe we'll see you on, I don't know, if it's Tuesday or Wednesday morning at 6:30. But this was a poster that looked at the advent of the PGT AI 1.0 platform. So at UConn, we took 6 months before PGT AI, and we looked at the results of those embryos, and 6 months after PGT AI, and looked at the results of those embryos, and this is basically what we saw. We had about 1,000 embryos of data from about 351 patients. And this slide is pretty busy. So if we look at a bar graph, for the patients under age 35, there was a pretty significant increase in the proportion of euploid embryos. And in fact, you do the math, there's 36 more euploid embryos after the advent of AI. For patients, that's pretty meaningful, right? Most of them came from better reading of the low-level mosaics, which went down. There was not much change in the high-level mosaics or in the abnormal aneuploid. And so this is pretty reassuring, right? So this was a real value add. If we look at the patients greater than age 35, we see similar findings. There's a statistical difference, and I don't have the percentage, but you can see that there's 51 additional euploid embryos. And we had a decrease in our low-level mosaics. So again, we have a higher number of euploid embryos and fewer low-level mosaics when compared to subjective calling. More transferable embryos in every age group. And so if we extrapolate the UConn data to the worldwide data, where Cooper is doing 100,000 embryo biopsies a year, and if this is a 7% increase in euploid rates, well, that's 7,000 more potential euploid single embryo transfers, which is pretty significant. Similar numbers of high-level mosaics and abnormals. And I think Cooper appreciates our feedback to them on the results of these transfers so that they can continue to refine their AI. So this is UConn data looking back 5 years, and we use the legacy system mostly for the Cooper genetics, and basically this is almost 500 patients, all of whom had a freeze-all. And some of these patients had a single euploid embryo transfer, and that's in the blue bar. And some of the patients had non-tested embryo transfers, and this was 1 or 2 embryos. So looking at primary transfer, patients froze all their embryos, and all these embryo patients had a transfer, either euploid or untested. And so we see statistical differences on each of these columns in favor of the euploid embryos, but this is all patients. If we look at just those patients greater than 38, when we know there's a difference, and if we just look at the live birth rate bar, 64% live birth rate for those patients with a euploid single embryo transfer, compared to 25% for untested single embryo transfer, and 41% for untested double embryo transfer. And these double embryo transfers had a 37% multiple pregnancy rate. And the untested embryos had, a 50 and a 37% miscarriage rate. So there was a pretty significant benefit to the patients with testing. So you and I both know that there are many PGT providers, and how do you choose the right one? And I think we're going to hear more from Tony about the use of cutting-edge technology and artificial intelligence for real innovation in the field. Because it's important that we don't miscall these embryos. We call a normal embryo aneuploid, we waste an embryo. If we call an aneuploid embryo normal, we can create miscarriages. It's high stakes business, we want to do it right. And most of us in the room are clinicians want to give patient-centered care. And for many of our patients who have infertility, this higher live birth rate per transfer and lower miscarriage rate is a bonus. We have recurrent pregnancy loss is one of the most emotionally trying disease that some of us treat with the emotional harm, the DNCs, the Ashman syndrome, the wasted time, and the requests for these patients after they go through multiple miscarriages to say, can you please test my embryos? It's important. So thank you, and for this.